Hi, and welcome to this week's episode. This is episode number 6 of the Sit Rep podcast, and I've got a really good episode for you today. I'm going to talk pretty much for an hour, or just under, or just over. I haven't timed it. I'm going to talk pretty much the whole time about the Tour de France. I have been gripped by the drama, gripped by the excitement, gripped by the atmosphere, the French spectators, the drama within the teams, the cyclists, the power, the speed, the commentators on ITV, which is where I've watched it. I watched it on ITV. I know in Europe you can watch it on Eurosport. I'm not sure what you can watch it in the rest of the world, but such a good event. And I hope you've enjoyed watching it and that you're excited to hear me talk about it on this podcast. And I apologise if you don't like cycling, as this is probably not an episode for you. If you're not a fan of cycling, then maybe skip it, but give it a go, because it wasn't long ago I hated cycling as well, and now I'm completely addicted. I was always told in a previous life, in a corporate career that I had, never apologise in advance for something you're about to do if you know it's going to be good and you're going to enjoy it. But I will apologise in advance now if you don't like cycling. I know I have a lot of followers, a lot of subscribers who enjoy my running videos and also my hard challenge videos, my ultra marathon videos, my park run videos. So if you're not into cycling, then I apologise, because there's one thing watching a bloke cycle London to Brighton for fun. There's another thing listening to a podcast about Tour de France if you have no love for cycling. Now, the reason why I say this and the reason why I apologise is up until, when was it? Up until May of last year, so May of 2023, I had zero, and I mean zero, interest in cycling, to the point where I actually had a dislike for it because of a bad experience I'd had attempting to lose weight. Well, in part of my journey of attempting to lose weight, I tried cycling for the first time, and I hated it. I've made several videos about how bad cycling was at the time. If I was following somebody whose videos I enjoyed watching because they were undergoing a similar challenge as myself, weight loss, getting fit, etc., and they started banging on about Tour de France, I would switch off immediately. However, as someone who, ex-cyclist, as someone who very much didn't like cycling, I've become completely addicted to cycling at the moment. All I want to do is ride on Zwift, cycle outside in the summer sun, and I have to force myself to go out for a run, and I have to force myself to train for some of the events I've got coming up this year and some of the things I've got planned for next year. However, having said that, I've also become completely addicted to Tour de France, to the Tour de France that I've been watching on ITV in the UK. If you're from the UK, ITV, but I know most of Europe have it on Eurosport. And I'm not sure what they have it on in America or the rest of the world, but I've been watching it on ITV and I've been loving every single second. And there's a few things that I just wanted to take an opportunity on this podcast. I mean, that's why I've done this podcast. It's kind of my mind dump. It's a part of my week where I get to sit down and talk about the things that I enjoy the most. The Tour de France obviously started over 3 weeks ago now, and it ended this week. It ended a few days ago. And I don't know what to do with myself. I looked forward. I actually got up really early in the morning. I was setting the alarm to get up and watch the previous day's race, because obviously I am far too busy to sit and watch 3-4 hours of cycling. And then if I did, I think Tracy would call the police, because I have responsibilities. And there's no way I could take 3 or 4 hours out of my day as a whole to watch it. However, I have been doing that. And the way in which I've been doing it is watching it on repeat the following morning. I've been getting up really early so as I can sit and watch it with my breakfast and my coffee. I'd also say that if you're from the UK, you will know that if you watch anything on ITV, you have to endure the adverts, and I cannot watch UK adverts. I can't deal with adverts. I will happily pay a subscription fee to not have to watch adverts, and that's what I've done with ITV. So I've been watching it on ITVX. I pay a subscription so I don't have to watch the adverts, but it only works on repeat. So double bubble, I get to watch it. That's enough of the technicalities of how I'm watching it. The point of this podcast is to talk about why I'm watching it. And the fact that Zwift, and I want to talk about Zwift as well, because Zwift has kind of led me into the place where I actually have started to learn about cycling. So, Tour de France. Oh my God, how good has the Tour de France been this year? I mean, I'm talking as if I watch it every year. I haven't watched any cycling in my life. I am 44 years old and I have watched zero cycling up until this year. And Tour de France has got me completely hooked and addicted to the point where I'm actually searching for other opportunities to watch cycling on TV. And I am looking forward to the Olympics for that reason. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk through my feelings and kind of my views of the tour and how hooked and addicted I've been. I also wanted to talk about some of my observations about the racing on the Tour de France this year as well, because it's been so explosive. I can only go by what the commentators talk about in regards to their own experiences of watching this event in previous years. They were absolutely, especially towards the end, they were animated about how explosive this year's Tour de France has been. And I've got to back that up because as someone who's fresh to the sport and someone who's never watched it before, it was so exciting. Like, you genuinely didn't know what was going to happen next. And as the commentators were literally saying, okay, they're getting ready to start, they're starting, it's going to be a slow start because there's a climb halfway at 70k. They're not going to do anything till then. Boom, they go off the start line or the lead in and they attack. They did the opposite of what the commentators were saying. And then the icing on the cake, the cherry on the bakewell, was Pogačar. Oh my God, how good is he as a cyclist? The man is superhuman. And I want to talk about him as well because I didn't think the commentators throughout the length of this tour gave him the credit he deserves. I mean, of course they were saying what they needed to say in regards to his wins, and they were very, very complimentary of him, but it seemed to be at points that they were avoiding talking about the inevitable breaks that you knew were coming, like especially towards the end, like the last 5 or 6 races especially. You knew he was going to be explosive, but they were completely how can I put it, they were obstinate to the point of being quite stubborn about talking about Vingegaard. They were talking about Evenepoel, and of course they were phenomenal. I mean, Vingegaard coming second behind Pogačar in regards to the yellow jersey, and it was a fantastic battle between the two. I mean, oh my God, that was just explosive. I could watch Vingegaard and Pogačar battle it out on all of the climbs. I could watch them all. I mean, I literally did watch them all day at some points. And Evenepoel as well, trying to keep up with them. I mean, I thought that was amazing as well. The fact that the guy was just trying to, you could see, he was like, to them, what I'm trying to do with, I'm not comparing myself to, I'm not going to go down that road of comparing myself to Tour de France cyclists, but I could really relate to what Evenepoel was trying to do in regards to some of the breaks. And there was a break on, I can't remember what stage it was. It was right at the end of a late stage in the tour, week 3, and there was a break. Pogačar had gone, Vingegaard's trying to go, and Evenepoel just could not keep up. He just broke, the elastic went, and he just sat back and resigned himself to the fact that he knew there was nothing he could do to stop both of them. And I just thought it was fascinating. Tactically, when were they going to go? What were they going to do? And I thought it was brilliant. So I just wanted to talk through some of the stages. If you guys want to know what my favourite stage of the Tour de France was, stay till the middle of this podcast at least, as I'm going to announce it. And it is, I'm pretty sure everyone listening, unless you love sprinting, I'm pretty sure anyone listening to this will love the stage that I'm about to choose. And I'm probably sure if you've watched it with the level of detail that I've watched it, then you will agree. This was probably the best piece of cycling I've ever seen, and most exciting piece of cycling. I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, as you could probably tell by my description of this stage. But yeah, I'm giving them too much away. Wait until the middle, and I'm sure you'll agree. The best stage of the Tour de France so far, my pick, I'm going to announce midway. So stage 1 started in Florence, didn't it? At the beginning. That feels like a lifetime ago now. And obviously Bardet won this. Now, Bardet being what is he? He's a veteran, isn't he, of the Tour de France. He had never won the yellow jersey. They went for that long breakaway, him and his colleague on the same team. It was a tough course, stage 1, and I've got to be honest with you, I didn't watch stage 1 with the same level of intensity. I did watch it, but I watched it on highlights. I didn't watch the entire thing. Whereas I think by the end of week 1, I wasn't content with just watching highlights anymore. I had to watch every moment of the race with full commentary. So I was glued to my TV for 3 hours a day, early morning, watching the previous stage racing. But stage 1 was a race which I watched on highlight, obviously it being a lot shorter. Highlights, I think, were like half an hour for the show. But obviously Bardet won it, and then Van den Broek allowed him to cross the line in first place, because obviously he was on the same team and he knew what it meant to him to win a Tour de France, obviously being a Frenchman himself and never winning the yellow jersey. So that was an exciting first race, which I thought was, that got me hooked. Watching that level of excitement, the fact that they went for a long breakaway early doors, it was reminiscent of Zwift racing. And I always get this impression, and I learnt this from the London to Brighton bike ride. I always got this impression that Zwift, like computer games, like playing Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty, it's completely different to real life. If I joined the army and went off to fight in wars, it would be nothing like Call of Duty. If I decided to go to America and live in New York, I'm pretty sure, with the exception of the odd instant, I'm pretty sure that 99.9% of the time is nothing like GTA. So when I'm Zwifting, I don't expect it to be like real life. I mean, for Christ's sake, I'm using arrows and featherweights to cheat the game, I suppose. But when I did London to Brighton and I was descending especially, I realised how much of a difference drafting made, or being aero. I realised that sitting in behind someone when cycling, again, I just want to reiterate, I've never done a group ride. I've never been out on a mass cycling event before. And up until... when was it? This year, up until May this year, I've never really cycled a bike other than when I was a teenager. So for anyone that's not watched all of my cycling videos where I kind of talk about my cycling experience, I'm pretty much, as an adult, as a 44-year-old, I'm pretty much a cycling newbie. I'm a complete novice. So when I did London to Brighton, I was blown away by how much of a difference being aero and drafting behind a better cyclist or a faster cyclist, how much of a difference it made to my effort levels, how much of a decrease in the output that I needed to put out to achieve the same results, how much of a difference it made drafting. So when I see, again, Tour de France, when I see this breakaway, I think to myself, Christ, it's not just on Zwift that people do these ridiculous breakaways that have no chance of coming off. And then in stage 1, that's literally what happened. And the peloton tried their damnedest to catch them at the end, and they had to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. Van den Broek took Bardet over the line. I mean, we've all got to agree that, surely. I mean, I'm talking from a novice experience. If you disagree, please say so in the comments. I'd love to get a debate going about this, because I've enjoyed it so much that listening to other people talk about it, I'm looking for podcasts that are talking about this, and listening to podcasts about Tour de France. Anyway, so then again, in stage 2, and again, stage 2 was a stage I watched on highlights. I didn't watch the entire thing, but this, I think, again, like stage 1, this was a huge breakaway. Vokulin, I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, if I'm butchering these names, I apologise. But yeah, he went for it a breakaway from the foot of the last climb. And as just under 200k ride. And then obviously Abrahamsen, who at the time was the king of the mountain, he was wearing the polka dot jersey and he came in second place. So, but he he came in 7-8 seconds behind the winner. It was unbelievable. But I think these two races were a bit of a tease to the other teams, and I think when UAE, especially Pogačar, started to see these teams winning, they came into their own. And then stage 3 was Piacenza to Turin, and this was where Gourmet won for the first time, the first black Eritrean to have won a stage at the Tour de France, and it wasn't just his only win as well. So this was a phenomenal performance. It was record breaking. He was setting a new benchmark for sprinting across this entire tour, and I think he played it phenomenally. Watching Gourmet's performance over the entire length of this tour was unbelievable, and it was the peloton for the entire length of the race. The commentators were trying really hard to make it exciting, and they were trying hard not to use the word boring, but there were people saying that this race wasn't quite where it should have been in regards to breakaways. But that's what happens when you get, what was that? It was a climb at 181k that was, not huge, but the sprinters were able to get to the end of this race with the climbers and then sprint for the finish. So Gourmet getting his first win, I mean, this was a fantastic race. And then stage 4, this was where I started watching. So after stage 4, I'm still watching these on highlights, by the way. And then after stage 4, this was a big climbing race. And this is where I was hooked. I loved the climbing courses. I loved the courses with the mountainous climbs, the twisting, kind of French Pyrenees, the French Alps. These were the climbs I enjoyed the most across the entire length of this course. Now, this was Pogačar's first win at this Tour de France. Evenepoel coming in second. So this stage went from Pinello to Valerie. I'm going to stop saying the names of the locations. But this was stage 4, and it was mountainous, it was climbing, it was winding. People were going for the King of the Mountain opportunity here. Evenepoel obviously wanting to have a big Tour de France, so he was attacking. UAE decided, especially towards the end on the last climb, they were going to control this race, and they were going to make sure that Pogačar had an opportunity to attack. And once he did attack, oh my God, he went for an explosive attack. I think it was, how far out was it? I think it was like 19 kilometres out. Let me just double check. Yeah, so Pogačar, he attacked with 19k left to go to get to the top of the climb, and Vingegaard went with him, and he attempted to try and stick to his wheel, and he just couldn't do it. He just could not keep up with Pogačar, and it was the first time I think that Pogačar showed that he was the strongest rider on this event by far, not just this stage but across the entire length of this competition. He was by far the strongest one. He was the one that was out for the yellow jersey, and the King of the Mountain was probably a byproduct of his attempts to get as many seconds under his belt ahead of his rivals. And it was just explosive. And then that was it. I was hooked. I wanted to see more mountain stages. I wanted to watch Pogačar attack on the mountains, watch UAE help him get to the point where even his own teammates, he was cruising when they were just absolutely dying. They were on their last legs, burning every ounce of energy they had just to get him as close to an attackable position as possible. And then he had to attack, probably further out than he wanted to. In this event, he attacked before the summit of the last climb, because obviously I don't think he's quite as strong as Vingegaard on the descents. I think Vingegaard's slightly more powerful. But the thing is with Vingegaard, obviously I've learnt this from watching the Tour, he had that big accident, didn't he? He had it 2 months before the Tour started, so he's had no training. He's come into this with no expectation on him from anybody to win the yellow jersey, to even win a stage. He was in this event to see what he could achieve after having such a tough time, a torrid time of the accident he had. And the fact that he, even not being at full capacity by his own admission, I mean, when he eventually got his own stage win, he was quite emotional about it, and he was quite honest of what it meant to him because of where he's been over the last few months with the accident and not being able to train and everything that goes with that. The fact that he's able to keep up with Pogačar, the fact that he's able to not only go with his attacks, not only keep up with his teammates, bringing him to the top of the last climb, but the fact that he was then able to go on to the next stage. I think it was the next stage where it was a Vingegaard Pogačar attack. Let me just find it. No, it wasn't. Stage 5 was Cavendish win. So the fact that Vingegaard was able to keep up with Pogačar, go with his attacks, stick to his wheel for as long as he has across the it wasn't the first time that he tried to do this. He tried to do it multiple times. And I think on this occasion, just by looking at his body language and obviously listening to the commentators, I think Vingegaard didn't expect Pogačar to win so convincingly. And I think that he thought it would possibly be able to be brought back on the descent and maybe misjudged, not push him forward with his attack more. But he kind of made up for it, I think, further on. Which one was it? It was stage 11. It was on stage 11. So I'll come on to stage 11 in a sec. But then stage 5 was obviously the Mark Cavendish win. I mean, this was brilliant. Mark Cavendish, this was his... How many wins has he had now? Unbelievably, Mark Cavendish got his 35th Tour de France stage win at stage 5. And it was a brutal sprint. I mean, I don't know what watts he was dropping. Unbelievable. You know, I can only relate to Zwift. It's the only time I will ever sprint. I'm never ever going to be sprinting in any event. I'm not going to sign up to a real life crit race. So watching this, really, the only comparisons I can make to watching this is what I do on Zwift. He was just an absolute beast. He attacked. I mean, there was a brutal fall just behind him where a couple of riders came together. They shoulder barged each other. One went down, and then obviously more followed because as they went into the melee. And Cavendish just absolutely blasted out of there. He had to come across the entire length of the width. He had to come across the entire width of the road before the finish line as well, so as he was able to get in the draft. I mean, he just tactically played it perfectly, and he obviously knew this was his moment. Because for the rest of the tour, he just wasn't there. I mean, I think there was one other attack he made, final sprint, but he didn't obviously get that. Understandably, you know, this was his last ever Tour de France. He's retiring from Tour de France after this year, and this was his last opportunity to get a stage win, and he's got that record-breaking 35 wins. Phenomenal. And as someone from the UK, British, it was great to watch. So, oh my God, Stage 6 was phenomenal. I mean, it was set up by the commentators as being a Mark Cavendish 36 win opportunity, but yeah, Mark Cavendish just wasn't there at the end. It was a sprinter's paradise. I mean, this entire route was almost pancake flat. Not a lot happened until the last, I think, 3k to go to the finish line. The peloton was huge, and Groenewegen, it was huge sprint at the end, huge. And Groenewegen came up on the left and caught everyone off guard. Now, people thought it was Philipsen. The commentators thought it was Philipsen that won it. Mathieu van der Poel had done a phenomenal lead out. He did it again, I think, in another stage as well. Absolutely brilliant lead out from Mathieu van der Poel. And Philipsen came up behind him, and everyone thought Philipsen had it, but Groenewegen came up on the left. No one was expecting it, and then Girmay actually got second. Girmay was so close to getting another stage win. Unbelievable performance, and this was, again, so exciting. I'm watching out for the mountain stages. That's what I'm addicted to, watching Pogačar and Vingegaard and Evenepoel attack on the mountains. And Carapaz as well. You know, I really come to love Carapaz's constant attacks at the end. The last few stages, I mean, I think he won football's equivalent of the Golden Boot. I can't remember what they called it. But he won for being the most explosive and exciting cyclist across the last few stages of the event. I mean, it was supposed to be across the whole thing, but towards the end, Carapaz was just phenomenal. And I loved watching him. And that's why I love the mountain stages. But watching these pan-flat sprint stages with Groenewegen, Girmay, with Mark Cavendish getting his 35th win, watching Philipsen, the lead out for Mathieu van der Poel, so Philipsen could eventually get his stage win. You could just see it all unfolding. And it was the same cyclists, it was the same riders attacking towards the end. Oh, it's just so good. And watching the team tactics, it's very different watching the team tactics for a sprint finish than the team tactics for a mountain or a mountainous climb. It's very, very different. UAE seemed to have that nailed when it came to the big climbs for Pogačar. But when it came to the sprints, it was just a different class, and it was unbelievable. So good. And watching them fight in the peloton towards the end, the last 3k to go, watching them fight and hustle and shoulder barge. I know you're not supposed to. It's not supposed to be a contact sport, but they were. They were barging each other out the way. And the amount of times, I just want to say this as well, the amount of times they went down, the amount of cyclists that fell. I know Roglic had to back out of the tour eventually, because of the amount of falls he had. And I got so much grief in my London to Brighton bike ride because I fell off. I got so much grief on my other cycling videos because I fell off twice. You know, I just feel like the newbie Zwift equivalent of Roglic. You know, I could be a professional cyclist if it was all based on how many times you fall over. Oh my goodness, the amount of times they went down. I mean, Girmay went down on one of the stages before the sprint finish, and he got a serious injury and then came back, I think, to get another stage win. So, you know, this was, a phenomenal experience to be able to enjoy watching the Tour de France this year. And I'm hooked. I'm already booking 3 weeks off next year to just sit and watch this. And then stage 7 was Evenepoel's first win. So then stage 7 was my first experience with the TT races. This was a solo TT. So obviously Evenepoel won this, Pogačar come in second, and Roglic third. And Vingegaard didn't place, which was surprising because of how strong he is. There was one bump. This was pretty much a flat course. There was one bump in the middle. If I'm honest, my own personal experience of this, I wasn't as glued to this as I was the other stages. The solo TT for me wasn't as exciting. You know, the fact that they're disciplined enough to be able to do this was, and the times, I mean, they just blew them out the water. Evenepoel, Pogačar, Roglic, Vingegaard, I mean, they are TT experts, aren't they? I mean, they are just made for streamlined speed, power, unbelievable. I'd love it. The only thing I was missing was the HUD display that you get on Zwift on the Tour de France screen. I know the screen itself was produced by the French producers, the people, you know, the television producers. They produced those pictures, and then obviously the ITV were just commentating over them. But I would love to have seen how much watch they were putting out. I'm sure they could have done that because they obviously have their individual bike computers, which they seemed really protective of. Every time they got off the bike, on the bike, they took the bike computer with them and they didn't allow anyone else to have access to them. And I found it quite interesting. Behind the scenes, I actually started watching behind the scenes commentary, and they were saying that none of the bike computers are put out by any of the staff, that all of the cyclists, all the riders have them for themselves, and they put them on the bike themselves, which I thought was quite interesting. So obviously they're quite protective of their own data and don't want that to fall into the wrong hands. But I would love to have seen the raw watt output, and obviously the weight, the watt to weight ratio, watts per kg. I would love to have seen that on screen, because especially on the TT sections, because I think that would have been really interesting. Hopefully this podcast is interesting, guys. I've been wanting to do this. I've got no one else. I've been talking about this with Tracy, my partner, and my kids, and they're just dead behind the eyes when I start talking about Tour de France now. Initially, they were quite interested. Tracy has got into it. She has watched a few finish line sprints and a couple of Pogačar attacks. She has been enjoying them, and she has had her views on it, which has been quite amusing. But you know, I've been looking forward to doing a podcast. I wasn't going to do a podcast episode on this. I was actually going to kind of, you know, gloss over it because I don't know enough to be confident in my opinion, but I am enthusiastic and I enjoyed it so much that I thought, you know, I'm just going to talk about it on a podcast. Why not? So then stage 8 was another Gamay win. Philipsen coming in second. It was a sprinter's win. It was a sprint finish. The teams, the thing I learned watching this stage was how much the weather can play a part. I mean, this was, I think, the first and only stage where the weather was just appalling. It was raining. It was wet floor. Wet terrain. You know, they had to contend with taking that on board on the descents, especially. There was quite a bit of climbing, but nowhere near in the mountainous stages. So the sprinters were able to get to the end with the peloton and then sprint for a finish. And it was great to be able to see the teams again get themselves into positions that allowed their sprinters to be in the in the best positions to be able to sprint for that finish. But again, you know, for me, and it was there was a viaduct they had to cross, and the side winds, they were worried about it being dangerous, and it just blew the peloton apart. The winds on this route, on this stage, just meant that the peloton became all fractured and drawn out. And it was, again, coming back to what I said about the only thing I can compare it to is Zwift. So it was just like Zwift, where it just become all strung out, and those at the back were trying desperately just to hang on for dear life. But it was a sprinter's finish, and it was a great win for Gamay. I really enjoyed it. Really, really good stage. And then stage 9. Oh my God, stage 9. So this is where it really, really did affect the Tour. So the 3 that ended up on the podium at the end of the race, so Turgis, Pidcock, and Guy, were not, you know, ones expected to be on the podiums in any other of the stages. And this was a controversial stage. Not controversial for me by any stretch of the imagination, but this was the gravel stage. And I loved it. Watching the scenes where they were bottlenecked. So coming out of the tarmac roads onto the first gravel section, and I think the second gravel section, they were bottlenecked. So those at the front of the peloton were able to get up the gravel fairly okay. I mean, they had to significantly reduce speed. And that meant that the wave effect going back on the peloton, those at the back of the peloton had to get off their bikes and walk up, because there was nowhere for them to cycle, and the speed had dropped down to 0 because of the gravel. And there was loads of cycling purists that thought that gravel stages just don't belong in Tour de France. I don't know if this was the first year gravel stages were ever introduced. I think they must have been. The controversy of having this as a stage just seemed to be heightened by the fact that they had to get off their bike and walk. But it was just so exciting to watch. I think it was brilliant. And so an unusual. I mean, Pogačar even tried to go for a ridiculous breakaway early on, didn't work. Yeah, really exciting stage. Really enjoyed the gravel stage and 100% want to see that again in future events. Stage 10 was a Philipsen win. This was a Philipsen sprint. This was a sprinter's paradise. This was a textbook sprint. This was out there as a Philipsen. Had Philipsen win all over it. Gamaye, I'm surprised he never won this actually. He came in really, really close. So this was the big lead out from Mathieu van der Poel. And boy, oh boy, if you ever wanted to have someone on your team as a cyclist, you'd want Mathieu van der Poel, especially if you're a sprinter. Oh my God, what a fantastic performance. And Philipsen on his wheel came through. Gamaye, close second, Ackermann third. I was more impressed. I mean, obviously Philipsen won by a great sprint and, Gamaye has been phenomenal. But I was so impressed with Mathieu van der Poel's lead out. I mean, unbelievable. Imagine having that as a, as a teammate on your team willing to do that for you. And I suppose that's what they train for, don't they? I mean, I'm making it out as if he's done him a big favour. But he did. Huge performance from Mathieu van der Poel. And then stage 11. Here we go, stage 11. This was my favourite stage. So as I said at the beginning of this podcast, I would say what my favourite stage was, and we've reached it. Stage 11. This was the Vingegaard Pogačar battle. So Pogačar had already attacked. He had won his stage. What stage was it? I already mentioned it. So Pogačar already attacked on stage 4 and convincingly beat Vingegaard over the top of the incline, over the top of the peak, and then down the other side. And he managed to hold the descent as well, which was unusual. So in this stage 11, this is where Pogačar attacked 600 metres from the top of the last climb. He attacked it and he still had over 31 kilometres left to go. Was it the top? No, it wasn't even the top of the last climb. I think he attacked with like 2 climbs left to go. And he was so confident. And I think he learned from this, actually, because he didn't end up winning. Vingegaard ended up catching him. And Vingegaard attacked with him, but he didn't attack immediately. He did close down the gap. So Vingegaard let him go initially and closed the gap down to attack at the top with 13k left to go. So he attacked to try and get the King of the Mountain points. And they both wanted the King of the Mountain because they both sprinted for the top of that climb. And then with 13k to go, they're neck and neck. And you at which point, because of the attack that Pogačar had already made, I think Pogačar still had this mindset as well. Because the attack that he had made on the previous stage where he had won and he beat Vingegaard convincingly, I think he still thought that with 1 climb left to go, he was still going to be able to do that. And then they just battled it out between them to the end of the race and up the last climb. And Pogačar just tried everything to try and drop him. And Vingegaard wouldn't go. He was on his wheel, couldn't be beat. And then Vingegaard took him on the line. It was a photo finish, one of the best pictures of the tour, and it's my favourite race by far because I just thought it was a phenomenal battle. I love the fact that Pogačar just wasn't able to have it all his own way. I mean, he pretty much did, but there were points in this tour, and that was one of them where Vingegaard showed how much of a class rider he is versus Pogačar's out-and-out ability. And I think the next year when Vingegaard comes back, having to battle a fall, having trained and psychologically being there, from a confidence perspective, I think he's going to give Pogačar a run for his money. And I think Pogačar knows that. So I think Pogačar is going to come back next year, mainly because of this stage, and realise that even without Vingegaard being on top form, he's still able to not only hold Pogačar's wheel, but he's able to beat him. And I think Vingegaard's the only rider in the world that can do that at the moment, because I think Pogačar is by far the best cyclist that this sport has ever seen. But yeah, again, what do I know? The next stage 12, was another sprint finish, and it was Gamaye's win. It was a phenomenal win as well. And this is where Gamaye had, I think, cemented himself now as the green jersey winner. I mean, obviously, it wasn't over by any stretch at stage 12, but he definitely cemented that. So then stage 13 was a Philipsen win. Again, it was another sprinter's paradise, but there wasn't any of the usual suspects on the podium. So Philipsen came in first, Van Aert second, and then Ackermann in third. This Philipsen win was a class act. I mean, it was a brilliant sprint towards the finish line. Van Aert done brilliantly as well, and Ackermann. I mean, Girmay was there, but he just wasn't able to beat these three over the line, and it was a phenomenal sprinters finish. But again, I was now, because of stage 11 and the Vingegaard-Pogačar battles, I was now hooked on the mountain routes. I wasn't, I enjoyed the flat routes. I thought they were great, but on flat routes, obviously it's a big peloton for the entire length of the course, and then it's a sprint finish. Watching Vingegaard and Pogačar battle on the mountains, watching Team UAE control the pace of the group, watching Carapaz, especially towards the end, attack on the mountains. Yates, I thought Yates was brilliant as well, especially towards the end. I think he came into his own. I was just hooked on the mountain climbs, and that's what stage 14 was. So stage 14 was, again, another Pogačar, Vingegaard, Evenepoel battle. It was phenomenal. I will say as well, this was the race where I really started to fall in love with Ben Healy. I thought Ben Healy had a fantastic tour, and he was very unlucky because there was a couple of times where he did attack, and I love seeing that. I love seeing the cyclists attack, especially on the climbs, because anything can happen. You don't know what's in the mindset of the riders around you, and if they're struggling and you attack at the right moment, then you can get a breakaway. And if you've got the power to sustain it, and Ben Healy's definitely got that ability. If he can sustain that, then, especially with less than 5k to go, then that breakaway can hold. And Ben Healy was just desperately, like Carapaz, was desperate for a stage win. I think I could sense it. He didn't get one, but I thought this was the race where I just thought Ben Healy was brilliant. So this was the race where I kind of got the impression that the commentators weren't fans of Pogačar. Now, Pogačar being, the way in which he had operated up until now, he'd attacked, he'd won a couple of stages, he'd raced Vingegaard to the top of one stage where he just got pipped over the line. For anyone to say that they didn't expect him to attack, or they weren't expecting him to go for it, and that's kind of what the commentators were alluding to. They didn't outright say this, but it just felt that they had a negative view of Pogačar's ability, or they didn't want to see him attack. They wanted to see other people win. I think they were huge fans of Vingegaard. He's a great cyclist, and I think they wanted to see him win more. And when Pogačar went for it, then it was just, explosive, and he pipped people off, and he went for it like 6k to go. The lead group, there was a couple of riders that had broken away from the peloton early on. The peloton was only like 40 seconds behind the lead group at this point. It managed with the work of his teammates in UAE, they'd worked really well to close the gap down from over 2 minutes, to close it down. Adam Yates in second. So Jorgensen was leading the peloton, pushing the peloton on, did a great job of getting the peloton down to, under 30 seconds behind Adam Yates, who was in second, who was doing a great job of trying to close the gap down to Ben Healy, who had done an attack. And Ben Healy was pushing this. He was only 6k at this point away from winning a stage. And, Adam Yates was doing everything he can. But, Pogačar just attacked and just went for it and just closed these gaps like they were nothing, like he was fresh out of the blocks. Unbelievable. This was, again, one of my favourite stages. So stage 15, and I felt really sorry for Vingegaard in this stage. Vingegaard looked like he was broken, and Pogačar just sat on his wheel the entire route, just sat there. From the beginning, from the start line, from the lead-in, just sat there until the last climb, attacked, and just left Vingegaard in his dust. He just went for it. And Vingegaard had nothing. I mean, he tried to go with him, and he didn't. And I think the commentators, I could see from his body language, he had no interest in trying to go after Pogačar at all. But the commentators were like, well, maybe he's doing what he did before, which is he let him go, and then he just closed down the gap. He just worked hard, TT'd his way back to Pogačar, and then they'll have a sprint finish. But that just didn't happen. And this is where Pogačar just showed his ability. He just absolutely blew everyone out the water. How he was able to win this race that convincingly, that easily. He didn't even look like he was breathing out of his mouth. I just thought his mouth was closed, he's breathing out of his nose. He was in zone 2. That's what it looked like. I mean, obviously he wasn't, but unbelievable performance. Again, look, guys, if you haven't seen the tour, watch the stages that I'm banging on about, because they're on ITV. You can watch them on catch up, completely free of charge, if you can endure the adverts. And these stages are some of my favourite. Stage 16 was a sprint stage. Now, this was, again, marked as a Mark Cavendish 36 winning stage. That never happened. This was won by Philipson and Bauhaus, and it came in second. It had a small bump in the middle where there was a sprint section on the decline, and it was a big finish. So this stage 16, again, was the Matthew van der Poel leading for Philipson. Unbelievable. Another one. Philipson owes him big time. He got himself another win thanks to Matthew van der Poel. I mean, it was an awesome practice session they must have behind the scenes to be able to pull this off. Again, another stage win. Great sprint at the end. So this was the one which I loved. This was Carapaz. This was so good. So this race had 3 new contenders on the podium. Carapaz in first, Yates in second, and then Maz in third. And Carapaz just went for it. I mean, he was so explosive, really, really good. And it was just a horrendous climb. I mean, it was just so high, and you could just see the sprinters struggling big time, stage 17. So this race, I mean, Carapaz just did phenomenal. He just blew everyone out the water, climbed like an absolute beast. I mean, he's an out-and-out climber. That's what he does. He attacked, and he managed to get his win. Phenomenal. Great to see. And this was also the race where Pogačar and Vingegaard got pretty much to within 100 metres of the finish line together, and then Pogačar just sprinted. And I was really surprised because Vingegaard allowed him to increase the distance on the yellow jersey. I mean, Vingegaard is still chasing down the yellow jersey at this point. He must have had nothing left because he just let Pogačar go, which I was surprised to see. But it was a great stage. Again, another mountain stage. Unbelievable. And then this was the Campenaerts stage. This was clever. So Campenaerts, Vircha, first and second. And this is the one where this is stage 18. And this is where Campenaerts pretended he wasn't feeling it. Like towards the end of the race, he kind of did a bit of a tactic where he pretended he was exhausted. I mean, he probably wasn't pretending, but he did the whole thing where he went to the back of the lead group. There was 3 of them in the lead. And he just he had nothing left. He looked like he had nothing left. His whole body language, he indicated that he had no intentions of sprinting, and then just blew them out the water, just sprinted for it and went for it. It was a great win for Campenaerts. Really, really good. Stage 19, I mean, there's only 21 stages. So then stage 19, I love this stage. This was a big mountain stage. Unsurprisingly, I loved it because it was a mountain stage. It was another Pogačar win. Jorgensen came in second, and it was great to see Yates on the podium as well, because I think Yates, being an Englishman, it was great to see him on the podium, and he worked incredibly hard. Like Carapaz, he's an out-and-out climber, and he was working all the stages where Pogačar was just picking people off. He was able to keep up there with some of the best, but he just couldn't keep up with Pogačar. But this was the the race where I was like, wow, this guy is something else. I mean, there's no one. This cemented him for me as being the best rider in the world. He just blew everyone out the water. Jorgensen had managed to create a huge lead on the last climb. So this stage is unbelievable. This stage is up there. It's probably my second favourite, below the other one that I described before. This stage was phenomenal. It's Pogačar with how many seconds was it? It was just under 3 seconds, just under 3 minutes behind. He was in the chasing group. Obviously, Yates was ahead, and then Jorgensen had gone a crazy distance out, and he had a 3-minute gap on Pogačar's group, and Pogačar attacked and closed it down. He attacked with just under 9k left to go. So with 9k left to go and with just under 3 minutes to close, I mean, that's ridiculous. 3 minutes on a mountain. I mean, that's like jumping the Grand Canyon. You just wouldn't expect anyone else to be able to do it. Pogačar just unleashed. But he never sprinted. He just increased his cadence. He looked like he had done it effortlessly. He just closed the gap to Jorgensen, and everyone that he passed in doing so just looked defeated. And Vingegaard was just nowhere to be seen. I mean, unbelievable win. Unbelievable. I mean, if I didn't love Pogačar before, I did after watching him win that stage. And I'm surprised that the commentators just weren't more all over that. I mean, it felt very lukewarm from the commentators, that they were disappointed to a certain extent to see Pogačar win that convincingly and to knock those cyclists off. And then stage 20, the penultimate ride, this was the last time they'd be doing it as teams. The last stage was obviously a TT race, solo TT, and it was another Pogačar win, a convincing Pogačar win. So then this stage 20, again, was just full of drama, full of excitement. Carapaz, I just thought he was brilliant. He had won the polka dot jersey because of his King of the Mountain points of the previous race. And he was just attacking everything, every single opportunity to attack. I mean, he must have 20 plus attacks. He was racing Maz to the top of the last climb. And then Evenepoel, Vingegaard and Pogačar were all in the same group. Jorgensen, who was pacing Vingegaard, was trying to get him as close to the finish as possible. He had to drop away, so Vingegaard had a choice to make. And Evenepoel then attacked. Now, obviously, Vingegaard and Pogačar just stayed on his wheel. They let him attack. It was a mistake. Evenepoel, I think, even looking back on it now, would say that it was a mistake. He probably shouldn't have gone. I'm talking with confidence here, but yeah, I thought it was a mistake. Vingegaard, Pogačar took it as the gift that it was and just sat on his wheel. And then as soon as he showed any sign of weakness, Vingegaard, Pogačar went. Now, Vingegaard wanted Pogačar to work with him. There was a couple of occasions where you could see Vingegaard trying to persuade him to take the lead, and he just wouldn't do it. And there was obviously respect between the two, because there was a couple of occasions. There was one nice moment where Vingegaard went to get a drink from the wrong team. I think it was Pogačar's team, and they refused to give it to him. So then Pogačar offered him his bottle, which I thought was nice, So there was obviously some kind of mutual respect there, as you would hope to see. But Vingegaard was desperate for Pogačar, and he obviously had said to him, "Look, you take the stage win. If you want it, but work with me. It's in your interest. I can't catch you. You've got the yellow jersey. I can't catch you, but I want to, work with you to get to the end." But they weren't working together. But ultimately, Pogačar managed to catch Carapaz. Carapaz came in third. Vingegaard came in second. Pogačar, a convincing win, again picked everyone off. Such a good race. But phenomenal stage, full of drama. It was more drama than an episode of EastEnders. And then the final stage was Monaco to Nice. This was the TT stage, and then Pogačar just blew everyone out of the water. I mean, Evenepoel was so strong. Evenepoel came in third. Vingegaard came in second. Vingegaard was awesome, TT. I mean, these two individually, if Pogačar wasn't even on the scene, if he wasn't even on a team in the Tour de France, if he just wasn't there at all, we'd be all talking about Vingegaard and Evenepoel as being the best in the world, because they are. But Pogačar is just on another level, and I am so excited next year to see Vingegaard come back. Evenepoel, I mean, this was, I think, Evenepoel's first Tour de France, so the experience that he's achieved, that the knowledge that he's gained through doing these 21 stages, he's going to come back he's just going to come back next year as a stronger rider, more experienced. Tactically, he's going to know what to do and where to go, sort of the things that he should be doing. He probably wished he had done on this tour, he will be doing next year. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Vingegaard, oh my God. Imagine what he's going to be like with the level of vendetta that man's going to have for Pogačar on some of these stages where he was just so close to taking it from him. And I think the stage where they raced and it was a photo finish, that is the Vingegaard we're going to see. I think we're going to see that across the entire, especially the mountain stages next year. But Pogačar, he is another level. He is just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And then next year, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think he's going to rewrite the rule book for professional cycling, for competitive cycling, because how else are anybody going to stay with him? He's just another level. Unbelievable. The way in which he picked people off on that climb as well. phenomenal. So look, I started this podcast by saying I wanted to talk through my Tour de France experience. I've been absolutely gripped by the drama, by the excitement, by the fun, the atmosphere. I thought the French spectators are mental. So good. If you've never watched a Tour de France, you have to watch at least one stage, and I recommend a mountain stage, especially at the peak where they get to the finish line, not the finish line of the race, but the King of the Mountain stage finish at the top of a peak where you've just got hundreds, if not thousands, of spectators, and there's no barrier, there's no cordon, there's no rules. They are literally in the road, and these cyclists have a very, very small, narrow gap to cycle through these hundreds and hundreds of people screaming in their faces. And there were moments where people were just being barged and pushed out the way. There was one very funny moment, I can't remember who it was, where one of the cyclists was trying to keep up with Pogačar as he passed him, and a spectator had got in his way, so he blasted him with his water bottle, just got him full in the face, full of water. So good. And there was another moment with a French policeman on the bike following the cyclist to maintain law and order, there was none, and he just pushed over a spectator that was running alongside. The atmosphere was, I thought the French spectators were brilliant. The atmosphere was phenomenal, and I said this to Tracy, I would love to go to a Tour de France experience in the summer next year, the year after, with a camper van and just do the tour. Just rock up, find a camping spot. I don't care if it's at one of the premium peak locations. I don't care if it's just the side of a road as they go flash past at 105 kilometers an hour, which they were doing at some of the points, unbelievable speeds. I would love to just watch it, just sit there with a camper van, a cold drink, some snacks, and just watch them fly by, and then pack up, go somewhere else the next day, and then do it all again for the whole tour. That would be a fantastic holiday. I don't think it would be as much fun for Tracy as it would be for me, but yeah, that's how much I've enjoyed it. I've been absolutely gripped. I am addicted. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you have enjoyed the tour as much as I have. Please leave me your comments below. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on what I've said. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? What was your favourite stage? Who was your favourite rider? Not everyone's a fan of Pogačar. Unbelievable. I mean, the commentators weren't on ITV. Not everyone loves Vingegaard. I haven't heard a bad word said about him. Evenepoel, he was phenomenal. I'm looking forward to seeing Roglic back next year if he can stay upright. I empathise with him. I know exactly how he feels, the amount of falls he had, the amount of falls I've had. I've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's come across. I've really enjoyed talking about the Tour de France. Apologies if you don't like cycling. Thank you for getting this far. If you've heard that apology, thank you for getting this far into the episode and for sticking with me. And I'm looking forward to next week's episode. So yeah, see you then. Cheers, guys.